start, just because I can, with one story that I'll always associate with Mahamati. When we ran our workshops together, she'd often tell of a woman friend of hers travelling through India who had to make an unplanned stay overnight in a small village. She found herself, Mahamati's friend, sharing a bed with one of the local women, and as it turns out, having fabulous sex with her as well. And the next morning, Mahamati's friend turned to the local woman and asked how long she'd known she was a lesbian. The woman had no idea what she was talking about and said, the thing we did last night? She said, oh, that's just something all the women in this village do with each other whenever the men are away. And whenever Mahamati would tell that story, she turned to every woman in the room who was leaning forward and say, I bet you all want to know where that village is. Mahamati and I first met when we sat at the desk next to each other at ACTS at the AIDS Council of South Australia, which was then in Darling House, which she'd also worked in previously in the Rape Crisis Centre. She was the women partner of Bisexual Men officer. I think I was the campaigns officer at the time. Her business came through line 4, which was anonymous. So lines 1 to 3 were answered AIDS Council of South Australia. And the 4th line was named after the building. We used to enjoy picking that up on a slow afternoon saying, hello darling, house here. Maha was forever looking for the creative solution, as we've already heard. When, for example, she learned that the young program supporting gay and bisexual men at the second story was called Inside Out after a cricketing term. She invented LBW for lesbian and bisexual women. I'd get phone calls late at night when solutions popped into her head like she was parking them in my brain just in case they fell out of hers before the morning. Even when we weren't working together, I'd get those phone calls that would start with the idea before even a hello. I'd pick up the phone and get rubbers with Erase Homophobia on the side. I'm sure we could sell them to raise money. Say, hi Maha, how are you? She would go through the magazines, the Darling House Library, and later the web, finding opportunities for us. That's how we finished up presenting our work at the International Victimology Conference when it came to Adelaide in the late 90s, which is where we met a very young teenage Daniel Whithouse, who's gone on to since become the leading expert in that field across Australia. Maha remained one of his biggest fans and a constant support. She was always frustrated at never being good enough, okay? Exemplified in, if you ever heard her talk about her films, you'd watch them with her and you go, that's great. No, it's not. No, it's not. Should have done that. She's always learning, learning, learning. Together, she and I developed the Blockout Challenging Homophobia Training Kit and Not Round Here, Affirming Diversity Challenging Homophobia Rural Service Providers Training Manual, what a mouthful. And we used that to underpin hundreds of sessions she and I ran together on challenging homophobia work. I just feel privileged. Every one of us who got to share our lives with Maha feels that privilege, I think, at the moment. I just felt so damn lucky for the number of hours I've worked with her, driven around with her, and look, she even got us to co-present our arguments to a parliamentary subcommittee on discrimination against LGBTI people, arguing with evil Senator Eric Abetz while he sat there with the Bible open on the table. Yeah, cute hissing. Those training workshops were run right across South Australia, and rural outreach here means we travelled everywhere from Whyalla through to Mount Gambier, and because I don't drive, it was always Mahamati was the one behind the wheel. She didn't so much drive as sort of aim the car. Anyone who's done those open stretches of country road, there's something about the red dust on the outside that just switched Maha into hurtling mode. And we'd often drive with an Osho tape or the latest narrative therapy CD going in the car, because as we've heard, Maha was completely eclectic in where she took anything she could take from and learn something from. She was always strongly spiritual, but never to be constrained by any particular religious teachings. As we heard, she went on to establish Befriend. She was the founding member, came up with the idea, stretched it out so that it would be a support for parents as well as same-sex attracted and transgender young people. Hundreds of same-sex attracted and other people here in Adelaide owe her their gratitude and would constantly come up and talk to her about it. When we first started that, it was in a Christian agency, and sorry for those of you who've been reading some of this stuff on Facebook, a bit of repetition, strain injury here, but we, at the same time they were doing this friendship program for newly identifying same-sex trait, they were having a Pray Away the Gay program. And people who were involved in that made it so difficult for Maha's co-worker that he left. So the agency got her and I to come in and run Challenging Homophobia for I think about 450 different staff members in this Christian organisation. I'll never forget, and they were a bit challenging. I'll never forget the look on Mahamati's face with one very serious Christian woman telling us why you could never serve bananas to lesbians, because you know what they do with them. For that reason and others, Mahamati preferred it when we worked with a freestanding whiteboard so that she could just go, conference, and we could step behind it and she could pull out her hip flask of whiskey and you deal with them before I put them through a wall. It's interesting because Maha taught a lot of us patients, but she also knew when she had to pass it over to someone else as well. And even when we weren't working together, we'd talk about our work, whether she was the regional coordinator of the Cairns branch of QUAC, working with local Aboriginal people, or the lead project worker in lesbian health at ACON, where she helped manage a group of anchor classes to prevent same-sex domestic violence. I learned so much from Mahamati, directly from her, but mostly also from her modelling. I learned, for example, how to be a leader without being run by ego. How getting on with it and just getting it done was more important than the middle class posturing of being seen to do the right thing. That effective change often happens slowly. That everything is political. To judge people by the standards of their own countries and cultures and not our Anglo-cis-centric world. That to embrace diversity meant you had to stay across all the newly recognised diversities within our community. And Maha was acknowledging and supporting trans issues and support for sex industry workers way before anyone else was. Well, most of our peers anyway. I also learned if something didn't work, you gave your shoulders a shrug and went, oh well, before trying something else you felt might work better. I also learned that if you were unhappy with your work, then the only thing you could do was do a better job of it. Maha never stopped until she stopped. And like all of you, I can't believe it. I keep adding to the list every day in my head, all the little things I'll never hear again. Maha going, God, or done it all, or her funny little barky laugh before she told you a story. Was she a saint? Not at all. No. The number of times she bitched about someone where she'd start with, I cannot stand her enormous appetites for alcohol, for good food, for sex, for books, for films. You probably, anyone who knows her remembers how thrilled she was when she discovered she could borrow electronic books from the library and cut her waiting time down, just like that. Because she wasn't the most patient of people sometimes. Illnesses, for example, were just an annoyance for her, and she often didn't stop and take care of herself along the way. I can't help but think somewhere right now, Mahamati is grumbling about the inconvenience of being dead because she's still got so much left to do. All right, we love you, Maha. Thanks.